Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the BMF Gauteng Women's Series event. On the 8th of March, we celebrated International Women's Day. The theme this year is #Choose to Challenge. For women to take up the role in shaping the pivotal decisions being made right now as countries recover from the COVID-19 or try to recover their economies from COVID-19 impact. The choices that are made will affect the well-being of people, economies, and the planet for generations to come. So we must challenge and break down the deep-seated historic, cultural, and socioeconomic barriers that prevent women from taking their seat at the decision-making table, to make sure that resources and power are more equitably redistributed. This is not a call for women only, but to everyone who has a vested interest in making South Africa and the world work. Our speaker today is one such person. I'm really excited to have her to share her thoughts about what can be done to start to break down these barriers. The UNDP says that at the current rate of progress, gender equality amongst heads of government, for example, will take another 130 years to close the gap. And so it's important to talk about intentional design as a way to move the dial in the direction of gender equity. When talking about intentional design, the apartheid system comes to mind, slavery comes to mind. Systems whose impact and effects are still felt many generations after they were put in place and ended by law. And so today we wanted to start a conversation about how we begin and to start putting systems in place to enable long-term empowerment of women and the value that will come from that intentional design. So today's program really is as follows. The DP of the BMF and the chair of BMF Women, Ms. Tasneem Fredericks, will do an official welcome and opening remarks to also introduce our speaker. And then we'll get into our discussions, and then Gertrude Merape, the deputy chairperson of Gauteng YP, will do the closing remarks. Just some housekeeping before we get into the program. If you have questions, please use the Q&A button or the comment section. We'll also try and invite a few people to just engage verbally with our speakers. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Deputy President of the BMF, Ms. Tasneem Fredericks, to do the welcome and opening remarks. DP, over to you.
Thank you, Mpho. So let me first of all just say good evening to all the members, to the leadership, to any presidents, past deputy presidents of the BMF, to yourself, to the board, if they're present, the BMF board, yourself, Gauteng Chair. I know we have, and I'm very happy to see the YPDP Deputy Chair on the line as well. And I think most importantly, a warm welcome to Mandisa Sibongile Mashego. We are very honored to have as part of this conversation this evening, as part of this leadership series. I think that these conversations, you know, because of what you're saying, exactly because of you saying this huge gap to close, this gender gap, this gender inequality gap is such a huge gap that we must be obsessed and we must be focused and we must be driven to talk about this like 24 hours a day. We should actually be working on this agenda. We should say, you know, Mpho, you speak from 8 to 12, I'll speak to 12 to 4. So we have, you know, we have this constant conversation happening all the time, because we are faced with deliberate design. I mean, apartheid was a program of separation that we are still feeling the effects of. We are still experiencing the trauma of apartheid. And I don't think we have healed or counseled enough on that aspect. And I think the issue with the woman, the Black woman, the Black young woman, there's an intersection. The President of the Republic has spoken on several platforms where he has spoken about deliberate intervention for what is known as triple oppression. So there's an intersection when we speak about being Black and then being a Black woman and then earning less because you are a Black woman. And then also, I think it's very, very important to never forget the struggle of students, especially now with the Fees Must Fall movement that, you know, occurred in 2015, yielded very little results. And now we see, you know, this mass kind of insensitiveness and really, you know, non-assistance from all the players, you know, from government, from business, you know, in terms of assisting young people access education. So as much as we know that wealth is generational, we also know that poverty is generational. So as Black people, we don't own land, so we don't have access to capital. We have this huge growing post-COVID unemployment rate. And if you look at the numbers, if you look at the age group that's affected, if you look at the demographic that's affected, you'll continuously see that the face of COVID was Black, is Black. The face of poverty is Black. The face of unemployment is Black. So the face of inequality is Black. So, you know, we live in a country where if you go to Cape Town, it actually looks like you at some villa in France. You don't know that you're in South Africa because we find that we are still the economic minority, especially as Black women. So when we have this Black female talent, you know, we need to showcase it. We need to hone it. We need to protect it. We need to ensure the survival. I'm reminded of the recent matter with African Bank and Basani. You know, it's something that BMF has taken up behind closed doors. And we also have to be sensitive to the agency that women have. You know, that men can never speak for us. I just want to be clear on that issue. As much as white people can't speak for us on transformation, no man can speak for us on the emancipation of women. It's not a man-led agenda. It's always going to be led by us as Black women. So nothing about us without us. We accept men as allies, but they're not going to dictate and tell us and drive this thing for us. We are going to do it ourselves. And we don't need permission. We give ourselves that permission. So, you know, when I look at the topic, the value of intentional design, it speaks to exactly what I just said, that we need to have deliberate, focused efforts, that we need to consciously make ourselves and everybody else aware of how we're going to achieve equality as women, how we're going to close the gender gap, how we're going to advance ourselves as Black women who lead, not on the shop floor forever, not forever as domestic workers, not forever as the slaves of men, but as leaders of nations, as leaders of companies, as leaders of governments. That is our place. So with those many words, Paul, I'm reminded I'm not the guest speaker. I want to just thank everybody for joining this evening and thank the guest speaker in advance. I'm anticipating, you know, a very vibrant and really, you know, well-articulated talk. And Paul, you will do the full introduction in terms of exactly, you know, who Mandisa is. I've seen her CV. I must tell you that I am totally starstruck, you know, by her accomplishments. And I think that tonight is all about celebrating her. So I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you, Paul, as well for organizing this and also National for assisting.
Thank you so much, DP. I think one can always depend on you to really speak truth to power and to us as women. I mean, I like how you bring in obsession, because really, if we don't sleep, eat this thing called women empowerment, we're not going to get it done, especially where there's some corners of society that still think that we must first speak and settle the racial inequality, issue first. So really, truly inspiring words. Excuse me, I need to take really inspiring words, and I think definitely a nice reminder for us in Gauteng as women and for the youth, Gertrude and her cohort. who would need to also just lead and make sure that we continue with this fight. Thank you, DP. So without wasting much time, I think I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce Mandisa. I think, ladies and gentlemen, it's truly an honor for me. I think I've had a crush on Mandisa for a long time, and I'm really, really excited that today she agreed to come and spend time with us. So I think many of us have watched Mandisa's journey, and we've been impressed from a distance and impacted up close. And I doubt that she needs an introduction, like I said. You would know her as a politician when I first met her. I met her as a politician. But what you may not know is that she's a seasoned professional, and she's worked in both public and private enterprises. Some of the companies that she's made her mark in include one of the big 4 auditing firms, the Tourism Grading Council of South Africa, Naspers, and Telkom. She's an expert in strategy design and execution, branding and communications, governance, and she is an activist. I think for us as the BMF, we can really identify with that. Activism is something that we really push and admire, and the type of members that we attract and want in our membership base is that an activist. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really keen to get into this discussion, so I'm going to stop here. Mandisa's CV, like DP said, is quite extensive. I also want to just give her room to really introduce herself the way she would like. So please, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Ms. Mandisa Mashego on our stage. Thank you. And you are on mute, Mandisa.
That's the price you pay for being disciplined. You mute yourself for way too long. Thank you so much to the Deputy President. An absolute honor to have met her, as well as Gertrude. I'm really, really, proud of the BMF. I think I would imagine over the 20-year or so period I've known of the BMF, I've never ever seen female leadership to the extent that you have now. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be offensive to anyone else who may have served. I think there was a lady who was there for a while. I forget her name, but I remember her face. May have been of Xhosa descent, I think. I just don't remember her name, and it's not intended to be, insulting or to render her invisible. I just, am so in awe that you've swelled the ranks. I can only hope and pray that it's not a as we've often been used as curtains, and that you are there genuinely representing the constituency of Black professionals who are females, and I would imagine as well as any females who are classified under transgender, as well as, within the LGBTQI plus community who are female, of course, because I've been very firm about the fact that we don't want to be infiltrated by, silly agendas. If you're a male and you happen to be gay, you're still a male, unless, of course, you define yourself through another gender description. I always do that because it's important to represent the both quantitative and perhaps qualitative minority in every discussion, in every activity. Even when I address community meetings, I always start and always, remind everyone to ask for pregnant women, people living with disabilities, and little kids to be brought to the front and be prioritized for seats, etc. So it's not because I have some kind of obsession with the LGBTQI plus community. I really don't. It's just that we are a traumatized society, and you can't remind people often enough to take care of vulnerable people, especially Tina Besifazane. We know more than anybody else how it feels to be permanently in a vulnerable, space, because that is ultimately our ultimate definition. And I'm really honored that you've asked me to speak on this. I'm not going to talk about my CV, except to say that I've worked in excess of 28 years, because I really started working when I was a kid. I grew up very poor, and my parents worked, but during the apartheid years, work was normal. Everybody worked. Most people worked, let me not say everyone, especially in the townships, in the underdeveloped Bantustans that I still refer to as Bantustans, because they geographically, economically, and in every other complexion have not changed. In fact, they've probably grown worse. So they remain Bantustans because the apartheid project, the apartheid spatial planning, as well as economic and separatist development program, actually was very successful in making sure that any possible gains of the democratic South African dispensation are kept in place, because they had such a long-term vision that started in the colonial era and lasted hundreds of years. And so during the apartheid portion, which was just really 48 years of the entire colonial period, the last 48 years of the entire colonial period. And so, to defeat a 400, 500, 300-year plan that is well executed and well strategized, is not easy, especially for a dispossessed nation. And so, yeah, I started working when I was 16. I needed to work during holidays. I worked at a shoe shop. I was packing shoes in the back of the store. And then eventually, because I did maths and science in school, the store manager asked me to start helping her with some bookkeeping and doing the daily banking. Back in the day, everything was analog and manual. So you had to literally go to the bank every day to deposit the cash. And it was a cash store. It was like one of those cheap shoe shops, very dusty and extremely busy. And so I think that's where I got my first taste of real business. And it was quite exhilarating. So I've been working for many, many years, and work has been a central part of who I am. And so for me, the Black Management Forum, even though I'd never taken up membership with it before, and for reasons that I still believe at the time were valid, I just didn't believe that the BMF was, pushing boundaries hard enough. And so, but I've known about the BMF and I've always respected them. And so as a person who started developing and carving a career through work, an honest day's work, I have got nothing but the utmost of respect for the BMF for lasting, the 45-year, I think you're 45 years old, slightly younger than me. And so I also loved, Mpho, when you sent me the topic of the value of intentional design. I think it's, it's a theme that you should keep for, not just for a one-day session, but perhaps for a year, if you can make it last even longer and give it sub-themes, because it's perfect, it's ideal. I said it with tongue-in-cheek, the fact of the success of the apartheid story, the colonial apartheid strategies. I said it deliberately because I actually know that all of us talking with each other today know for a fact that the colonial apartheid design and strategies, economic strategies, because they were not political strategies, and I'll explain to you why. And that's a mistake that we as Black people make, of believing that colonialism and apartheid were political. They were not. They were economic. The politics was just used in order to appeal to the human emotive side. and to the predictability of us as Africans to respond always emotively, and we still do. And for as long as we respond emotively to things, we will remain on the back foot. Even us as women, Black women, we respond emotively to everything. We respond emotively to economic questions. We respond emotively to cultural questions, to social questions, and everything in between and in the periphery. And the reason we respond emotively is because, in my belief, we're just not getting to the point of human development that we need to get to in order to transcend our realities, our material realities today, but also to transcend our genetically encoded traumas and the traumas that we've picked up in our current form, as in our current life. So if I'm 47 years old, I've picked up a lot of trauma over 47 years old. And so that trauma needs for me to transcend it in order to reach a higher state of human development. All of us as human beings, especially as human beings, especially as Africans, need to do that. And more than anything, the most traumatic experiences that are memorized in our sort of genetic makeup are the ones that have happened over hundreds of years. So until we reach that point, we're not going to overcome the remnants of colonial apartheid, economic onslaughts. The following point following that is that I want to stress what I said earlier, that the Bantustans exist because the European strategies to dispossess and invade Africa, including South Africa, were purely economic in terms of their targeting and their objectives that they'd set out. But they were also very well structured. They were not accidental. So, your intentional design theme talks to that. It's the intention. What do you do with the intention? You plan, you design, you strategize, you calculate. You can't calculate without using science. Mathematics is science. So I'll come to that as well a little bit later. Because I'm sorry, I no longer speak from a pity party viewpoint. And if there are sensitive listeners in this conversation, I would suggest that, when I start making insensitive comments, they try to either mute me or mute themselves and go make a cup of tea and come back. It won't last very long, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to pussyfoot around anything. You asked me to come and speak frankly, and that's what I'm honored to do. And thank you so much for the platform. I'm going to be very quick, really, so that we can have a discussion. I'm only going to touch on central key points, which really, for somebody who spent over 20 years in corporate South Africa in various industries, in both the private sector, multinational organizations, medium-sized organizations, large organizations, large conglomerates, both multinational and local, as well as a little bit of time in government. And somebody really who, I would imagine, like many of your members, landed on the affirmative action and BEE borrowed policies of the current ruling government, which were essentially cut and pasted from the USA, from the USA's civil rights movement gains. BEE and affirmative action were literally carried in a briefcase by Cyril Ramaphosa, who was very, very closely linked to the Oppenheimers in the 70s. And it made only sense that obviously they would want to have guided him as people who had a lot of money and still have a lot of money and power in the world, and had a very clear interest in South Africa's future in relation to protecting not their South African investments, but they are global investments using South African and African minerals. And so even if all our gold had been depleted, it wouldn't have mattered. They would have done the same, because this was the springboard from which the De Beers, Anglo-American, etc., imperialist agenda, like I said to you, colonizers and Europeans, when they arrived in Africa uninvited, didn't have an emotional political plan. They had purely economic intentions for themselves. They were very, very focused. And so scientifically, they went about carving a clear plan to attain their goals, and also to make sure that once their goals are attained, they're so firmly in place that us, the natives, whom they studied socially and politically very, very closely, got to understand all our weaknesses and understood, based on whatever scientific, forecasts that they were doing for themselves, got to understand how to use our weaknesses against us. Yes, we become very sensitive when people tell us that, our kindness is a weakness, our humility is a weakness. Yes, it is a weakness, because we are emotional. We mix up kindness and humility. And I say we because I'm starting with myself. I do it often. And I think it's only around the age that I'm at now, a couple of years, maybe earlier, dating back, that I started learning and appreciating that kindness and humility are actually weaknesses, because we deploy them wrongly and we misunderstand the value system of the world, what governs the world globally. And we believe also in the colonial discourse that was used to, coerce us and force us into cooperation with the colonial agenda, besides physical force, which is the Christian religion and the Christian Bible, which often tells you to turn the other cheek, which often tells you to forgive 77 times, 7 times a day. I was raised Catholic, so some of those things, even though I'm not Catholic and Christian anymore, I remember, because that's how good the colonial project was. It was very clear. It understood how to, force you into submission. It understood the importance for weapons. They understood the significance of planning and strategy, like I said, and they also mostly understood the importance of behavioral science-based strategies, which means how to brainwash you, how to get you to basically turn your value systems around, and adopt value systems of other people. So how does this impact us as females today? I'm very proud that the BMF is taking up the Basani struggle, because it's exactly what I think all of us as Black females, no one can claim to have monopoly over this experience, because it has been an experience of our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, our great-great-great-grandmothers, etc. That as a woman, you clean up, and when you're done cleaning up, you leave the space nice and clean and neat and quietly for the big and mighty, physically strong and so-called powerful men to take over and enjoy all the credits. And all of us as females, we do this, and all of us have been subject, sometimes unbeknownst to us, have been victims of this. We continue to be victims of it, and we are going to continue. We should not lie to ourselves. We're going to continue to be victims of it because of some of the things that I'm gonna get to. And one of them, we all know, is the fragmentation and the lack of cohesion, the lack of planning, the lack of foresight and forward thinking, and the lack of just basic guts and adventurism. The lack of all those things with which we pursue our goals, our life goals, whether it's family goals, career goals, business goals, political goals, social goals, whatever goals we may have, our fragmented, divided, and extremely toxic way of doing things as females. We have an extremely toxic way of going about, all our common struggles. And we actually think that we can continue like that and things will change. And they will not. They are actually getting worse. Statistics are out there. We all know that during COVID, the height of it, when the height of retrenchment started in South Africa last year, of the almost 3 million workers who got retrenched, and in excess of 2/3 of that 3 million were Black women. And that is why poverty and inequality has now grown to the extreme. On the back of what? On the back of the fact that already Black women, African women in particular, and colored women are the poorest, earn the least salaries in whichever tier they are operating at. So the point I'm making is that whether you're a CEO, you're a board member, except for, boards and other, seats or positions that are very well regulated, such as public positions where you can't pay a member of parliament less than what has been gazetted, etc. But we know what happens in the private sector. You have HR policies that say this tier must earn this much, but there's always the fine print that talks about looking at the caliber and quality of the particular incumbent. The incentivization for people who are coming with special skills and special abilities and special contacts, and who can do special magic for them. So in the private sector, salaries are even classified as confidential, and I'm really dismayed that the BMF has never ever fought that in court, because it's a simple thing. You take it to the court, it will be outruled immediately, I can almost guess. If public representatives and CEOs, public CEOs and ministers and all of that, their salaries are public, why should the salaries in the private sector not be public? Because that is precisely how the so-called colonial apartheid wage gap has been sustained. So perhaps I should move into the solution mode, because I really want to wrap this topic up. I wanted to give you themes to think about. I can't speak with people who are as senior as yourselves, way above my level, and literally, as though I'm in a political gathering. I'm not. I'm speaking to people who are super intelligent. There are probably a few actuaries in the audience, of course, chartered accountants, lawyers, etc., and many other wonderful careers like mine, people who are in the fluffy careers. Mine is a fluffy career, brand communications. I started off in the sciences, and then I just decided, I want to do fluff. I love fluff. Because I can. That's the pleasure of doing maths and science. I try to force my child to do maths and science and exit school with maths and science, because I really firmly believe in it. Because if you want to do fluff, you can do fluff. If you want to do engineering, you can do engineering. If you want to do astrophysics, you can do astrophysics. If you got the right grades and you want to be an actuary, you can. But if you don't do maths and science, then you are extremely limited to what you can do. So it's just a question of strategy and opening up your options. So for me, these are the things that we as Black women need to grasp with very, very urgently. That, yes, of course, because we come from poverty, securing a job is everything. Getting that contract from whichever client you've been trying to hunt it down from is everything, yes. In fact, learning to work at a very, very early age, if you're a female, is everything. Teaching our children the work ethic. Doesn't matter if you have 20 million Rand already invested and you know that you're set for life. You can't say, my children, are not going to grow up the way I did. You're not helping them. You're not insulating them. You're not vaccinating them. You're not inoculating them against the realities of society. If you say to them, I'm leaving you with all my money when I die, don't worry, everything will be fine. Trust me, imali yabo iyophela in 3 months, as soon as you're gone. We all think our children are wonderful and they've learned from us, but they don't really. They will spend that money on Ben 10s if they have Ben 10s, or even older men, because, the illusion of marriage and permanent partnership for us as females growing up in a patriarchal society culturally is just so attractive. And they will even spend it on drugs, etc., because we've just become like the men. And so What is extremely important for us is to develop a good work ethic. We must learn the good old-fashioned lesson of hard work. Why? Because you are under siege. It's not going to happen any other way. It doesn't matter if you got your job through a carpet interview, right? Because we know that happens. Men are in power the way white people are in power, right? So there's white privilege, there's male privilege. That male privilege extends to black males as well, to whatever extent compared to the whites, of course. They're so scared of white men. White men have beaten black men down over hundreds of years. They can't touch them. And so the only people that they can take out their frustrations on are those that they deem to be vulnerable. And the only way to get out of that vulnerability is to get out of it, is to learn a work ethic, is to understand the importance of the sciences, is to understand the importance of making sure every girl child studies maths and science. We are Tanda. And I've heard people say that not every child can do maths and science. It's not true. If your child starts to do maths and science at the age of 2, as soon as they start to grasp basic concepts, a triangle, a circle, a rectangle, and a square, and how they fit into each other or don't fit into each other, your child has started to learn maths and science. And all girl children, if we know what we want to achieve, must do maths and science. Let me tell you, even if they only exit at matric and they study nothing else, because some of the richest people don't even have matric, by the way, it makes those children the most adaptable people in society, and it makes them competitive as well. But more than anything else, it helps you with lateral thinking and problem solving automatically. Just getting maths and science training at school level. We need to understand that we must take care of ourselves. We are more reproductive than men. Men are reproductive as well. We all often undermine that. They produce the sperm that we need to make the babies inside our bodies. But because we are more reproductive than men, our health is centered around our sexual reproductive system. So for a woman to, to be a successful, holistic person, not even successful, just a balanced person, you must take care of your health. You need to be in good health. You need to be fit. You need to be strong. You need to be physically able. Get off the sugar, get off the carbohydrates, get off the alcohol, or bring it to a bare minimum. Why? You need your body. You fed the maths and science. Now you need the body to be physically fit to last you to the age of 80 at least, so that you can continue working in whatever capacity. I might now no longer be packing shops at shoes at Feature Shoes, but trust me, I'm working harder than I've ever worked before. So you never ever stop working. The concept of retiring, I know that those people who live in the bubble, in the fake bubble of capitalism, thinking I'm going to retire at 40, because you hear white people saying that. Sorry, an overwhelming majority of us Black women are not going to retire at 40, and therefore take care of your body. But more than anything else, it's your right to give birth, right? The Constitution guarantees it. Make sure you have a healthy body, healthy eggs. Don't forget to freeze them at the age of 30, because we don't have time anymore to be making babies before the age of 30 the way some of us did, because we now know we're smarter. We know we must build careers, etc., etc. I want to have a baby right now at 47. Had I frozen my egg at 25, if I knew there was such a thing at the time, I knew about it remotely because I studied a bit of medicine, but I didn't really understand it. I wouldn't have had a problem. Now I would just be inseminating and having a baby. It's part of what makes me happy, right? It doesn't mean that I want to be a man. I'm not trying to be a man. I'm actually happy I'm not a man, because quite frankly, I think they are in a very sorry state of affairs right now. And so going against the grain, working hard, making sure that you're putting your best foot forward, all of those good things are brilliant. But here's the thing. If women don't start to understand that the business environment, the work environment, the economic environment is excessively political. Yes, it's all about the economics and all of that, and that's the ultimate focus. But the politics is the means to the prize. That's it. That's what I wanted to come to when I was explaining that the colonial project by Europe was not a political project. It was an economic project using politics as a means to the economic goal. Once they got to your brain and told you that you're inferior, chased you away from the mountains and the rivers and the caves and everywhere and said, no, it's witchcraft. And in the 1700s or 1851, actually promulgated the Witchcraft Suppression Act, which was promulgated in the 1700s in Britain for the first time, and then in South Africa. And nobody up to this day, I talk about it all the time, has seen the link, right? That they needed to use an emotional stimulus to start to disarm you. We need to do the same. We need to identify the social, cultural, and political elements that we need to manipulate as Black women together collectively in order to attain our economic freedom. I've heard, even in the preamble, and the Deputy President also alluded to it, that we need to take, we need to be given economic this, we need to be given that. You can't be given anything. Nobody gives you anything. I think we should know this. We should have learned that that kind of language is what's holding us back. Because the minute I believe that my mother needs to give me her house in her will when she dies, or she owes me whatever money, or in her life insurance, I must be a beneficiary, I'm in deep trouble. Nobody needs to give us anything. We need to go carve our own economic plan, collect the rural women who are languishing in poverty in the main, and I'm talking really far outlying rural areas, who have left their homes, beautifully built homes that they've sacrificed their entire lives for, to come and work in Gauteng. Can collect those women. Most of them have got the most brilliant ideas. Bashawa nje, low self-esteem and lack of certain things which are material. The minute we can start closing the social and class gap between us and the women who are in the old townships, the new townships, the informal settlements, the rural areas, the peri-urban areas, in the colored townships, we have a lot of divisions amongst ourselves as Black people. When we secure that job that I spoke about, which is important, and that deal, we become so obsessed with ourselves and so obsessed with proving that, oh, I've done it, and oh, you know what, I'm better. I can finally move out of Hillbrow. I'm going to live in Sandton. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that we not only physically leave each other behind, we emotionally leave each other behind, we mentally leave each other behind, we spiritually leave each other behind, and eventually there's no consciousness left. And even those economic goals that we were chasing end up slipping through our fingers, because there's just really nothing solid of substance holding them together. So the intentional aspect of us getting out of this sorry state of just being violated economically, violated physically, sexually, violated, spiritually, and violated culturally, especially. That way, that state of being won't change. You need to go and look at the United States of America. Go and look at all the countries in the diaspora, maybe with the exception of Jamaica, I don't know. And look at the similarities between the Black women there and us here in South Africa. We've never met them. Some of us have never traveled there. They've never come here. But we are in the exact same situation. Why? Because we lack what we need. And those are the resources and the capabilities to understand that we really need to be intentioned. We really need to shake off this sickness of entitlement. And we really need to get rid of the stupidity of thinking that the person who has violated you has spent a lot of time, money, effort, and energy violating you in order to extract from you, in order to put your labor to work for their profit benefit, that person is the same person who's going to come back and rebuild you. So BE deals, affirmative action, not going to work. Why? I mentioned it earlier. The mismatched policies that the current government applied to allegedly uplift Black people out of poverty and ignorance and backwardness are the exact same policies that have taken us back. So when the right wingers, Freedom Front Plus and the DA and others say that those policies are wrong, by the way, let me tell you, they're telling you the truth. They might be coming from a different context, because everything is about context and positionality, but they're telling the truth. You know why? Because those two policies have produced more poverty, have produced more inequality, have produced more unemployment, more homelessness, more bankruptcies, more economic strife, specifically for Black women. And I'm really, really sorry to tell you this. We might need those policies, yes, in a different format and all of that. You can lobby Parliament and lobby, you know, the economic cluster and relevant committees. It's very easy, it's simple stuff. That's like overrated stuff. Trust me, I've been there, it's very overrated. Majority of those MPs in Parliament are just agents of imperialism and are agents of corruption. And corruption and the imperialism have joined forces, and they have one goal in mind: to self-enrich through any means possible, either through capitalist exploitation in the workplace, in the private sector, or through corruption in government. But it's the same project. You must notice that white people don't really complain much about corruption in government because they don't care. The 3 trillion rand that government collects is nothing compared to the trillions that they command in the private sector. That's money that in the CODESA agreement, they knew that, we're willing to give the Black people that so that they can have some kind of political power, feel emotionally happy because they are emotionally stimulated, and then we carry on with our imperialist project, right? But here's the reality. We need to understand that we need to create our own Broederbond, which must be led by the sharpest brains we have. The scientists, actuarial scientists, behavioral scientists, mathematicians, people who can actually design something that can take you to Mars. Not politicians or activists. Politicians and activists can come and say what they think they want to see. But then on a secondary level, we also need to carve a clear governance plan. And when I say governance, I'm talking about governance in the context of governance as you understand it, in the corporate space, in the government space, but also governance of how we take our plan forward. How do we mobilize society? How do we mobilize Black women into, you know, relevant civic structures that are geared deliberately to fight the political space, the business space, the social spaces, the international spaces, lobby? We need to create an Afrikaner womanist agenda. I have been very vocal about not supporting feminism as it stands, because feminism as it stands is not understood very well by all of us. It's a European construct of the feminist struggle. In Australia, they produced Germaine Greer, or is she from Britain? I don't remember. They've produced great feminists, and I respect them, by the way, great feminist, struggle heroines in the West, especially in the last century. But there are feminist struggle heroes in every era across different centuries. We have our own who fought physical battles. But now we need to focus. We need to focus. We need to understand that we need a specifically Afrikaner characterized womanist agenda. And this is because of what your deputy president was saying earlier, that you are very, very clear about the fact that feminism is for everybody. My father fancied himself a feminist and actually made me a feminist, by the way. So anybody can be a feminist man or female. But we can't have men leading that feminist agenda, because then you're allowing agent provocateurism to infiltrate you. Before you know it, they'll be dishing out freebies to you because men have got money. The few billionaires that are there that I know that are Black are males. They don't fund any scientific institutions, research institutions. They've never built a school, a simple school. They've never funded any science, maths, economics and, whatever agenda. They don't even fund a current fashionable topic of artificial intelligence and fourth industrial revolution. They've never funded even a simple thing like, water, which is a very serious thing to actually fund now with the growing population and the scarcity we have. They don't fund anything of substance, so-called Black billionaires, but the white billionaires do. Again, I'm going back to that intentional. So we need to be very clear that this Afrikaner womanist agenda, which is an economic agenda, is over, what's the word? It's way overdue, way overdue. And really with that, I want to leave it at that and then just open up, hopefully, for conversations. Thank you very much for indulging me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think, Mandisa, you've said a lot. I was trying to type and write on the slides in terms of just what I picked up, but I think what for me really stood out is the fact that you mentioned where we all thought that it was really a racial thing, that it was an economic strategy. To a certain extent, I think we understood with the ESCOMs and stuff, but I think today for me, it's really landed that it was really about economics and perhaps how we've then tackled our fight, just as a Black people, around racial. We should have started with economic, discrimination or economic equality first. That should have been how we started this. And I suppose, I mean, although as the BMF, we were very central to the employment equity, and we're really proud of it. And as a person who can claim to have benefited, I mean, I got a bursary just after 94. And it was purely because companies were scrambling to sponsor Black people. So I'm a beneficiary, and I really am grateful. But I think what I'm hearing is that we need to just think beyond that and think, how do we then perhaps form our own systems, form our own enterprises. And I think I like the concept of Afrikaner, although it sounds like you're saying Afrikaner. So to my ear, Afrikaner feminist. There's a young lady who has branded T-shirts, Black Womanist. So I think yours, Afrikaner Womanist, is also a feminist, is also something that is really, we could put on a T-shirt. And I really, I wanted to just maybe as a way to start the questioning. I mean, I have questions, but something that you said sparked a question for me around when you said we are emotional and we respond emotively. I just wanted to just get clarity perhaps around, just because as women, I mean, most of us, when you're quite passionate and feel strongly about something, and you position your opinion with men or even other women, you sometimes get categorized as emotional, high-strung, or feisty. So I'm just wanting clarity around, just are you linking it to the negative connotation, or are you saying we must, how do we then channel these emotional responses to further advance and use it to strategize and bring in that intentionality around design?
Oh, thank you. I'll be very quick. I referred to that concept in the context of all of us as Africans, and the strategies applied by Europeans to extract and dispossess. In order to go and build Europe, you must remember that Europe was built with the gold and all the other stuff, the iron ore extracted. If you look at the history of capitalism, you know, the industrial revolutions, this is the fourth one. So dating back to the first, the wheel wouldn't have been possible without the iron ore from Africa, etc., etc. So it applies to all of us as Africans. So what they did, they related, they could, you know, after studying us as Africans, and let's not take away from the fact that it's a strength. I think sometimes I speak very ironically. It was meant as an irony more than anything else, but also to help you to also think about your own way of understanding it. That as Africans, we are very soulful, grounded, spiritually wholesome people who were also interpreted as being naive because of the concept Ubuntu with which we engaged with each other, especially Tina in the southern tip of Africa. And so the emotionalness is not something that refers to, for instance, the characterization of us as women, or also the emotions that we often experience because of the, you know, hormonal composition of our bodies, and also just the nature of us as women. I'm very emotional, for instance, and I love it. I express it anytime. If I want to laugh, I laugh. If I want to cry, I cry. And as soon as I'm done crying, I'm done. You know, I don't, you know, drown in an emotional state of crying. I cry to release, you know, I'll scream to release. I laugh also to release, because everything needs to be released. If you keep it in too much, it becomes, and so it's a blessing for us women that we are emotional beings, but our emotive way of responding to technical and material things is the enemy, even as Africans, to confuse spirituality and grounding and being soulful and being, you know, just good natured. Like I said, even our sense of humility, our innate and inherent kindness, our innate and inherent recognition of divinity or greatness within each other. Mangithi umuntu, ngoba nami ngumuntu. It's because I'm acknowledging and honoring your state of being a human being, because the human being is the highest form of existence in the world. It's the most honorable way of existing. So I can recognize that and appreciate that without being stuck on the emotional side of it. I'm not sure if it makes sense what I'm saying. There's a very big difference between a collective emotiveness of a society and the lack of control over that, because it's extremely important to control that, because that is exactly what was used. So our emotional attachments to who we are, our land, our indigenous knowledge, our indigenous plants, our indigenous animals, our indigenous everything, right? Our entire universe in the space that we live in. Our emotional attachment to that was used against us. And therefore it's important to understand that it's critical to, emotions don't mean, not responding emotively does not mean you don't show or acknowledge your emotions. It requires you to have greater control over them, to be more conscientious when you are thinking about the state of emotionalness or emotiveness, so that you are deliberate. You accept, you're like, listen, I'm in mourning now because my husband died. But there's another part of my brain that is still rational. You can still come to me and ask me a question. You know, I need to pull myself out of the state of mourning just for 5 minutes. There's nothing wrong. Doesn't mean that now I'm in mourning. As it often happens, you know. No, and then you're like, then you respond with emotion, right? so that's what I'm talking about. It's a very difficult concept to unpack, but that's the best I can do.
No, I think it's you've made it quite clear for me. I just didn't want us to walk away with a misunderstanding, and then there's misquoting. And so I just want to pick on that, just linking to social norms and gender ideology. So I think culture has a big influence in gender relations of power, and patriarchy is one such gender ideology. I listened to a talk of OECD, one of their blogs, and Diana, they were interviewing a lady, Diana Franco. She talked about unlearning machismo. She's from one of the South American countries. So I just wanted to probe, how do we begin to do that? Especially when we have people like Gideon. I stalked you a bit online, and in March, one of your interviews, Gideon was not shy to write on a national platform that, I quote, "Patriarchy is one of the things that protects, funds, and builds women the most." And then he says, this woman should appreciate it and say, thank you, patriarchy, for building the world. And I wanted to bring that in because I found it quite strange. Firstly, that in 2021, you still have people who are not shy blatantly like that, who can say that. And for him to also just, as a Black man, to then say it built the world, it reminded me of one of the politicians' comments a while back around how colonialism built South Africa. So I just wanted to maybe perhaps probe you a bit and just talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really to talk about because, you know, when you give attention and time to stupid people, you embellish them and you expand and you basically help them to accelerate their message. But of course, for the benefit of, you know, all of us, to make sure we're on the same page. Look, when Helen Zille said what she did, it was a classical example of what happens when somebody believes that their privilege is threatened. They'll find anything to use to justify, you know, the wrongs. So a Black person, you know, who says that patriarchy is doing the same thing as what a white person would do when you raise sharp issues of, you know, colonialism, etc. You know, for the sake of historical context, because I really don't think that even the colonialism conversation is useful, except for when you're using it to analyze and to benchmark and say, look, I mean, we could do A, B, C, D, but avoid this and that. It's just a small person who feels threatened somehow, somewhere, and they need to say something, you know, that hopefully will mobilize other small people like themselves towards their beliefs and towards them trying to protect, you know, or, you know, scrambling for protection of whatever little bit of privilege. In any event, shame, Black men actually don't, we all say it wrong, Black men are not agents of patriarchy. They're agents of chauvinism. They are chauvinists. Our cultural, you know, even the so-called cultural stuff, I challenge even my partner, who is a very strong proponent of, you know, African chauvinism. And I challenge him, you know, it doesn't matter whether he says there's no feminism and politics in my relationship, relationships are political. The power dynamics between us and our boyfriends and husbands, political. The power dynamics between us and our uncles and bosses, male bosses, political. So it's not worth ventilating. It's just a stupid comment from a stupid person who feels threatened, and really shouldn't be paid that much attention to, because, you know, shame, man. What else would a person like that, you know, a smart person who can see that my terrain is being threatened, you know, that's what I'm proposing. They look for completely new, refreshing progressive things to do, and they even take responsibility. It's like men who say, when we talk about the rape and violence, physical violence statistics of South Africa, men who say, I don't rape. It's like, that's not possible. Only 6% of the rapes are reported. So what are the chances you're in the 94 unknown percent that can't be reported by your family because they're scared of you? Because when now umujali famontlung or uvusmuzi, I don't even know why mothers always give their boys those toxic names. I mean, it's those men who thrive on, you mean like, you know, the kind of man that makes that kind of comment to say patriarchy built. It's just a toxic shame. Who needs some sort of sensitization, but unfortunately won't get it from us because we are focused on an Afrikaner womanist agenda. It's okay. Everything they've done and they continue to do, it's okay. It's a distraction to continuously be fighting these people. What would be more progressive is for us to establish new things that we can do and follow. And then in 20 years' time, when they see the collective effect of our economic agenda, which is genderized. And because affirmative action, for instance, is also about, you know, correcting the imbalances of the past, but collectively, unfortunately, it has not resulted in that. I also benefited. I didn't really, because I started working long before our project ended, but because affirmative action was meant to correct the wrongs of the past, but it actually did the opposite, as we all now know. There's just a few that have benefited from it, and even those few don't qualitatively expand that benefit. They don't multiply themselves and they don't multiply their benefit. But the reality is that, you know, yeah, we can talk about it. It makes for interesting conversation, but we all know what a snake does when it feels threatened, right? It's just going to take out its worst venom. You know, it's not going to hug you, you know. And so that's just a snake feeling threatened and just spewing out venom.
Okay, great. So I'm going to. So I just wanted to maybe go back to the UNDP statement around 130 years to close gender equality gap amongst head of states. And it's the same podcast that I was listening to. Also, there was a mayor of one Canadian cities, and she was being lauded for being one of the best cities in Canada for gender equity. And she remarked that the number of female mayors had reduced in their municipalities. And she said, in her words, due to terrible misogyny and the tone of criticism. So having spent time in legislature, I think I just want to draw from your experience around that. And just maybe if you could share with us what can be done to, if anything at all, to improve conditions for women in these spaces while we work on our project of collectivism.
Yes, and I'm glad that such an example exists even in an extremely progressive country comparatively to us, such as Canada. The reason that happens is because our so-called accolades that we give ourselves and the progress that we believe and claim to have made is fake. It's not fundamental. It's not foundational. It's fake. It's really superficial. And that's the problem. And this is exactly what I was saying about affirmative action and BEE. BEE and affirmative action have produced the opposite result, even though a minority of us have benefited from it. To a very silly extent as well, because I spoke about the colonial apartheid wage gap. We thought we benefited because we came from, you know, abject poverty. So according to us, getting employed in a junior management position and getting paid 200,000 Rand was like 2 million Rand. And then as soon as you started to understand wealth dynamics, you're like, no, but this is not money. And then you started realizing that you've got a bond, you've got a credit card, you've got an overdraft, you've got a car, what, you've got Womashonisa, you're owing the school, you've got Truworths, Edgar, Starfields, then you realize that, no. So so the reason why our development is so stunted as women, our economic development, is because it was an agenda determined by men. You see, that's what I was saying earlier, that you can't hope that your rapist is going to come back and do everything in his power to heal the wounds within. You know, it sounds like a very cruel thing to say, but no one who has deliberately planned and plotted and even put resources behind a plan to oppress you, suppress you, and subjugate you to themselves is actually going to do the reverse. They won't. There's no such a thing. So it's brilliant that it happened in Canada. You know, I was once asked if I would ever want to be a South African president one day, how I would feel. And I said, no, I wouldn't. I would probably get raped. I would not have the privilege that all male presidents have had. I would definitely get raped. I would definitely get attacked. I would be the first president with the rape stats in South Africa. I would be the first president in the world to be raped or known openly to be raped. Because the more we go for these quotas and numbers and all of that, and by the way, look, I believe in the numbers, it's important. When you do scientific and mathematical planning, you must have numbers. You must be clear that by the end of 2022, I must have 100,000 Black women demarcated geographically across South Africa in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sectors, pushing targets and revenues of XYZ number in their sectors, in their own businesses, and then even clocking net profits of so much. That's strategy planning. You go right to the details. So I'm not saying don't have quotas, don't misunderstand. I'm simply saying to you, it was a trick. We didn't know, but now we know that it was a trick. We thought men wanted to empower us, and yet they just wanted to patronize us. There's a difference. Bebafuna ukunipholisa. Ni feeling ngathi something is happening. Ni feeling ngathi shame, you know, they really want to solve the problem. White men in particular, of course, because they are in charge. Black men live on actually lucky position. I mean, Black men in South Africa have even gotten to a point where they're so pathetic. Now they are starting to complain that Black women are getting more opportunities than them in government and in business. Oh, please. Opportunities. We are still going to create opportunity. Abame kancane, abakakabi nomona. Angithi abafuna ukusiphatha kahle. Uma ungafuna ukungiphatha kahle, I get out. It's that simple. Like, we must not be emotional. We must not have emotional attachments to these things. So those statistics will never be sustainable. The only reason that parties say gender parity, let me tell you, you can have gender parity with any female. Just put 10 females and say, listen, I've got 10 females on top. And then literally they're females. They have breasts, they have vaginas. They are wearing weaves, makeup like me. They're females. And that's it. And you're done. Is that what you want? Is that what you really want? That's not what we want. What we want, like I said, we could, for instance, have very well-organized civic society in business, in your professional spaces, in NGOs, in political parties, across the value chain of the economic, strata, and actually put very capable women there who are very clear about this agenda that we are pursuing, and well mobilized, well educated, well informed, well researched, and well intentioned. But like I said, the governance is actually more important than the economic strategy, because when there's no governance system in place to monitor proactively and to step in and say, no, we're now starting to have a problem, right? It's like your system, your proportional representation electoral system in South Africa. It simply says 50-50, we must have gender parity, men and women. It doesn't say anything else. So you can literally go around the corner and get the Nyaupe guy who's begging at the robots, clean him up nicely, put him on your list and say he's a male, and go and get the same Nyaupe person who's a female and put both of them there. I agree you wanted male and female. And put them there, and then everybody, and then no one will complain, especially white people. They're like, the lamer the puppet is that you put in place, the better. And so it's not there's nothing you can do about it. Women need to understand, right, that even the benefits that men dispense to you, they dispense that benefit to you precisely to patronize you. I was saying this to my partner earlier, that listen, me and you might get married, we might not get married. I don't know if I'll be married by the age of 60. I'll give up at 60 if it doesn't happen. And you might give me all the money in the world because you want to make me happy. I still won't be happy because it will be your money. I want my own money. And then you must have your own money. And then we must buy each other very expensive gifts together with our own money. Then it's more romantic. Then it's fun. So we are at that point now where we need to exclude the fluff. We need to weed through the PR. We need to weed through the imperialist agendas. Imperialists are very good at managing you. Very, very good at managing you. They come up with the best strategies to manage you. You don't even know you're being managed. You realize after 30 years, governments are being managed. Wow. We need to lead ourselves now. Take what we can from these toxic spaces that we all find ourselves in, because you must toughen up. You're there. There's nothing else you can do. Take what you can get from them, and then we need to very quickly carve our own agenda fast and invest in that agenda. Men are very, very quick. Did you remember what happened with this toxic Jacob Zuma guy first got into trouble, correctly so, and some of us were bamboozled into thinking that he was really about the black agenda, right? You know what men did? They set up what they call the Jacob Zuma Trust, fast, to say, let's defend. Hamba wena umuntu wesifazane get into trouble in any sector at a high level, and see how many women are going to be collecting the 20 rand to go and defend a wrong thing you did. You see, women won't even defend you. Men will collect hundreds of millions of rands that they steal from us in government to defend a wrong guy doing wrong things. Tina, we won't invest to defend a right woman doing the right thing. So we need to think about that, and we need to get ourselves in the right.
Sure. I think there's a lot. I'm just looking at the time in terms of we're moving towards a close, but I think we need to have another circle of some sort. I just want to take Dinel's question. She's struggling with her mute button. So Dinel says, thanks for the presentation. I agree that we will never win this war, especially the economic, political, and violence against women, unless we are united. What are the current women's organizations missing, and how do we bring these organizations together to represent the real issues and create unity of purpose for all the Afrikaner women? Afrikaner feminist, Afrikaner agenda, yes.
Yeah, well, we just need to do it. We need to, all of us. South Africa is a small country. It's really not big, trust me. You can move from the furthest point to the last point of South Africa in an aeroplane in 2 hours. I think east to west, if there was a flight from Durban to not Windhoek, somewhere in the Northern Cape, it could probably also be 2 hours. We are very well organized now. Some of us have got experience in different environments, in all environments. And we've learned a lot over the 27 years. We also, love our men very much, our African men. We actually need to start organizing ourselves fast, but underground. Now I'm no longer about the overt stuff. It's just, when you're working on a 100-year plan or 300-year plan, China has got an economic policy of 300 years, which is almost like their constitution. No one can change it. Even when a new party comes in, they designed it that way to keep the Chinese focused. Yeah. Like I said, it must be a holistic plan. It must have a health focus. It must have an indigenous knowledge section. It must have an education focus. It must have an economic focus. It must have the math sciences and whatever focus, etc. It must be extremely well. It must be a brutal bond. It must be an extreme privilege to serve at the top echelons of it, and then it must move down and organize right at the grassroots level. It's that simple. Because once we are liberated, Thomas Sankara said it, then men will also be liberated. In fact, there are many progressive men who are also tired. You know, they're like, yo, the pressure is too much pressure. You know, men have woven themselves into a pressure. White people as well. There are lots of white people who say, listen, I want to be freed from, you know, from this guilt that I have. Can someone come up with a plan I can buy into, that I can partake in? And I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to patronize Blacks. I'll give you what you need. If I have some money, I'll donate and just support and say, guys, please, you know, heal, but also progress. So we need to be organized. We need to be scientifically organized. We need to have all sorts of talents and skills and everything that we need. We need to have the ground. Many of us don't know, you know, we avoid our relatives in the rural areas. We avoid our relatives in the townships. Since we think we are upwardly mobile, we avoid because we avoid very, very basic things that we now need to start getting in touch with in order to come back and ground ourselves and find ourselves and say, you know what, actually, I can see that, you know, even myself, I'm leading into a tailspin with all these credit cards and this high life. And COVID has exposed a lot of that to us, has exposed it to ourselves, which is nice. So we no longer have to preach to people about this stuff. And so we need to organize, the sooner the better. The BMF is already a beautiful platform. NAFCOC used to be a beautiful platform. Somebody, for the sake of Black pride, needs to add impetus to what your work that you're doing, Chairperson of Gauteng, and say, listen, let's add other aspects to Black Management Forum. Let's grow it in 100 years' time. Let our children be proud of it. You know, iskugise, retirement, and literally now we can start talking about legacies the way white people talk about legacies of 100, 200 years. And then, you know, make something out of this BMF. Let's grow it. Let's take BMF and give it a new focus in terms of the woman agenda, and, you know, and be nice to our fellow men and say, listen, guys, please, we're not leaving you out. We just want you to just relax a little bit, take a break. You've got a lot of pressure. Go and deal with GBV. Go and try and find jobs. Take care better of your wives and your children. Just go and focus on your problems. We'll come back and employ you and all of that and empower you, because we are natural sharers and natural nurturers in any event. No woman likes to accumulate and not share. All women must get to call. We buy food for everybody, we buy clothes for everyone, and then we remember after 2 weeks, I shouldn't have bought for you, you know, but we do it again next month. So let's go for the sake of rescuing our society. African society needs African women now more than ever. Black men have failed. Black men have given up. Black men are tired. Black men even feel embarrassed because abasaz, I always tell them, if you were real men, they wouldn't have colonized us. So just wait. Don't try and tell me you can do this to me and do that to me. And then, you know, you can come back and tell me whatever you want to tell me. So let's go and do it for our men and do it for our children and do it for posterity.
Oh, wow. So I think, yeah, there's lots of questions that I wanted to ask you, but I think maybe when you answer, you can wrap up. I see Ms. V was asking around just for central message. So I think maybe if you can help her and just in just your closing remarks, just 1 or 2 key things that she can take away. I think you've said a lot, and sometimes it becomes emotion. What is this? Information overload. I'm certainly going to be part of that secret society, the Illuminati of Afrikaner women. And I know I've seen quite a number of people that I'm already volunteering, but I won't give you their names in public. I'll text you their names. So I just wanted to, so I was just thinking, and I know, I mean, you from what you've said so far, it's probably, I can probably say guess your answer, but I wanted to just ask anyway around. I mean, I had a look at the countries that have got high gender equity that are rated by the Economic Forum around just high gender parity. I think Finland is one of them, Iceland is one of them. And I looked, I mean, Iceland had the first woman representative in parliament, I think in the 50s. I just need to check. 1922, the first woman elected to Icelandic parliament. And the first head of state was 1980. So that got me thinking around whether it's role modeling or is it so the importance of role modeling and just normalizing these things in society. I mean, for them, it became normal to see women leading quite before most countries. So as we maybe wrap up, and then we hand over to Gertrude as Mandisa finished how role modeling and just normalizing some of these things, how it plays in. Yeah.
Look, thank you so much, Paul, for quoting those historical stats. I wasn't aware that Iceland was the first country to have 100 years ago next year. And you said they are one of the more equal societies. That's precisely what I was saying. That the sooner we start on our own program, 100 years from now, we would be, or even a shorter time, because technology obviously will probably shorten the time frame. So there's no, the longer we delay, the longer we complain, the longer we moan, the longer we read stats of how bad our situation is, the more we waste time. Our situation, the house is on fire now. When a house is on fire, you can't stand outside and say the house is on fire. Everyone can see, everyone can smell it, everyone can feel it. We really need to roll up our sleeves and get going with the task. Nobody needs to wait for anybody. BMF is already specially purposed. BMF can sit back and collate a few women and come together. There's a lot of gaps currently I can think of. A simple one is an economic pressure group, right? Where we know that, okay, look, even though we know affirmative action has been implemented wrongly, we can influence and lobby companies and government to amend the affirmative action as well as BEE policies to suit our agenda. Those are low-hanging fruit things we can do. But more than anything else, instead of waiting for the big guys to hand things to us, we can start now. Listen, we have opportunities in the most fundamental sectors of the economy, the primary sectors of the economy, in agriculture, a sector that multiplies itself so many times over. We can go into that sector now. We can invest. There's a lot of Black women farmers. They're just producing stuff that white people told them to produce. They're not producing indigenous crop, indigenous herb. They're not producing hemp, which is the strongest fabric you can find. The lady Thandeka Kunene, who started the first company that was called House of Hemp against the grain more than 20 years ago, when anything associated with hemp was evil and demonic, She got into recently a massive battle with the white company that she was involved in. And nobody, she told me, she said she knocked on so many Black business people's doors. Nobody was willing to help her. Had we already had those special purpose vehicles, had BMF already been purposed for that, we could have quickly put together Black women who know how to mobilize resources and quickly gone to court with her and said, you know what, we don't care whether, she's benefited without us. You are not going to bully her with her own business and her own company. We already have things that we can do, Paul. There's nothing smart and intelligent that I can say, except that the sooner we start organizing, mobilizing, and identifying our strategies, We can start with 5 key things. We don't have to take everything. And so we're going into the sector, but we're also going into other sectors that are not necessarily economically, attractive. We can go into the social spaces. We can improve our responses to these GBV things. We can do so many other things to protect and defend and progress the lives of Black girls, so that in 2010, 20, 50, 30 years time, they can all look back and say, you know what, we are genuinely grateful. They can be grateful to the work that we are going to be putting in, the same way we are grateful to the work that was put in by Charlotte Maxeke and Winnie Mandela and Wangari Maathai and Zinga, etc. We are grateful to them for the little bit of energy they gave us to be able to get to the point where we can even have these discussions. We now just need to quickly take it to the next level. Anyone who has an idea, anybody who has the energy, anybody who feels they have the enthusiasm, by all means, call a meeting. I'll avail myself if the time allows, and then we can kickstart anything. We all have ideas. We all have things that we've already started. We can just collaborate with each other and very quickly and urgently start to take things forward.
Great. I know I said Gertrude must just come in, but I wanted to acknowledge Joyce Mukwebo. Joyce, I apologize. My tongue doesn't usually pronounce some words properly. I apologize. Oh, and then there's lots of volunteers, Mandisa. We can do this tomorrow. So thank you. I always look forward to hearing you speak. So I know Gertrude is going to do final remarks and an official thank you, but heartfelt from my heart. Thank you so much. Lots of things to take away. And somebody's just told me you've challenged us as the BMF, so you've also got me into trouble. Thank you. Thank you. Gertrude, thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot with us, but I just also want to add a few comments. I agree with you with what you said on that we are emotional, and I think as a society we need to use the policy and the legislation in the country to actually correct the wrongs of the past. And I agree with you in terms of the role that BMF should be doing. An amendment of the BE and also affirmative action. And I just want to get your view and the gender equality bill that was drafted in 2014. It was sent to Parliament, but it was never passed into law. What are other things in addition to reviewing the BE and basically requesting that we amend the BE and affirmative act to suit our agenda? But I think that bill as well, because the fact that you basically have, but it was never passed into. What are your views about it?
Thank you so much, Gertrude. I'm assuming you're talking about the amendment to be honest about the women element, that it's not all women. That was one of the amendments in that bill. Sorry, I don't remember it word for word, but it's one of the things I always followed and obviously agreed with. Look, I mean, we can, when something gets stuck in Parliament, right, you must ask those who stood to benefit from that amendment, if they were silent and inactive and did not follow up, they are then to blame, not Parliament. Parliament is just doing what they do. They're just there to collect salaries and fight as little as possible, or pretend to fight when the cameras are on, and the rest of the time, and so precisely what I was saying earlier, when we become more proactive, more forthcoming. So if we had collected ourselves as Black women and gone to Parliament without marching, sometimes just visit the committee, send a delegation, people we trust who are honest, who are not going to go there to negotiate their own little things for themselves, we could have gotten that bill passed. So it's just a question of us now going to Parliament and getting the committee that was reviewing it. It would probably be, it would have been Labour, because it's a labor law, or it would have been under economic development, or under DTI rather, under trade and industry, and affirmative action under labor, to go to those various committees and the speaker's office, right? Where they always window dress the speaker's offices with females. Even the speaker didn't bother. You see, that tells you that the MPs are not really there for us. It's us who want to see things in parliament change. The constituency based, and I mean, I didn't talk much about the electoral stuff. I really would have liked to, which is my other hat that I wear to get, you know, the Electoral Act revolutionized, which we are already there, by the way, with New Nation Movement. But it's us as constituencies, once we get the electoral reforms that we desire, to see a constituency-based system taking charge, so that if you are an MP, you are representing me. You're not representing yourself and your mother and your husband and your kids, right? I can then push you. I can even get recourse. For instance, if we already had a constituency system, Parliament would not have been able to sit on that bill, because we would have been empowered to go back and say, you guys didn't process the bill. Which constituency elected you? We are going to lobby that constituency to remove you because you are not representing us. And so I would urge BMF even to, I mean, if you want to approach me individually, it's fine. I'm with the political party now. You know, you're not obliged to to drag me in through the party. I'm an activist in my own right, and we can go even write a simple letter to Parliament, make reference to that bill, get it back, even get an opportunity to amend it further, because now we're smarter than in 2014, and then push harder and put a lot of pressure on them to actually effect it, because it's true. White women could never ever have been on the same level as it's those things that I was saying earlier on about, you know, an imperialist agenda is never about you. They're always just, you know, trying to bamboozle you. White women can, in fact, I would even go as far as saying, to some extent, even Indian women, if we have to be very racial about it. If you look at the unemployment rate of the Indian community, it's between 1 and 2 or 3%, right? And so for them to be prioritized, I'm not saying that they should be left behind, because they also, you know, they're part of us. They also suffer the same scourges we do, although to a different degree, cultural biases, etc., etc. But of course, if you look at the GBV stats, it's only African women and girls who are mainly the victims, which shows you that society still has a protectionist attitude towards white women and Indian women, etc. So I fully agree. I mean, it's something that is an oversight. It's a pity that while I was still a public representative, before I resigned, this wasn't raised with me. I would have tried by all means, and I knew about it. But you know, when you're in the provincial legislature, because of all these fragmentations of the system, you lose track of what's happening in Parliament and what's stuck in Parliament. You focus on your provincial stuff, and time just takes over. So I would think that, you know, the BMF must really push very hard. The Deputy President and all the female leaders of the BMF, don't be shy. Request a meeting in Parliament. Parliament is yours. You actually don't even request a meeting. You tell them to give you the schedule of when the sittings are, and then you indicate to them that you want to come and present this thing, and then you go and challenge them in a parliamentary sitting as a stakeholder. You are allowed. In fact, you should be doing that, and then we can take it from there, and we can use many other activists to put pressure, and pressure groups as well to continue putting pressure. It's definitely something worth following.
Thanks a lot, Mandisa. Yeah, and another thing, just to add on to that as well, I think we also need, as BMF, we need to look at what are the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms that can be used to track progress, because it's been 27 years after democracy. But if you look at the stats, if you look at your EE reports, progress is very slow. So I think we've been talking. So now I think definitely BMF, we now need to really act, and we can only, I think, make progress through this type of policies, basically requesting amendments, basically requesting that Parliament also implement some sort of like monitoring and evaluation system, because a lot of our policies are there, but no one really keeps track of progress. And then you're basically going to realize 10 years later that you actually were not making progress, or when suddenly the stats coming out of Stats SA showing you that now you've got 60% youth who are not employed, who are no longer now working. So I think definitely, thanks a lot, Mandisa, for your views. And I think one more comment as well to all the ladies is we definitely need to change the way we raise a girl child. We need to teach a girl child to obviously work ethic, to run your own company, have your own business. We cannot always be fighting for positions in other people's companies. I think we definitely need to start building our own companies. And also, obviously, it also talks again to policy, the issue around how do we give small business access to market? Because a lot of Black businesses, they struggle to get access, but yet we are the market as Black people. So it goes back to, again, what you mentioned earlier on, lack of unity, that we are not united, we don't support each other. And that's something that I think we definitely need to work on. And I definitely do encourage that. I think the BMF as well, we need to embark on some campaign to actually encourage Black professionals to say, how can we support each other? How can we support Black businesses? Because if we don't support our own, we are not going to see the transformation that we want. We are responsible for that transformation. I mean, the world doesn't owe us anything. It's us who needs to make things happen. So I think with those words, thanks so much, Mandisa. But definitely, I think we will, obviously with Mpho, keep in touch with you. I think we'll definitely need to take these conversations further and obviously put together maybe a team to start working on engaging Parliament on requesting these amendments and to make sure that they also keep track of progress and we end up seeing the changes that we want to see. With those words, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone who managed to join us today. Really appreciate the time that you made for us. Mpho, thanks a lot, and any other BMF leadership that are probably still on the line. Thanks a lot to everyone. Thanks everyone. So I think that's it for today. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.